What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to give you guys a very quick update on NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall markets. But just know that I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on invested cash. The offer ends very soon, in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about the markets and why tomorrow is going to be very crazy. So, NIO saw a very flat day. It did dip all the way down to our 4.5 target. As you guys know, I've been saying that there's a head and shoulders like structure on NIO. This will likely see some downside. Yes, that is a possibility. So you have these gaps to fill below. And I think the odds do favor downside in the near term. But for the long term, I remain a very big bull for lots of EVs like NIO. I think NIO is going to be looking for a lot of improvements to their margins as they start expanding to different areas, and they have their new sub brands coming out. So I'm still a big bull, guys. Don't get me wrong when I say I see some downside for the short term. I'm still a very big bull for the long term. But I want to talk about something very big that's coming out for the short term for the markets, and also what the news is saying about NIO before I break down more details about these charts. So let's talk about this real quick. What's happening with the markets? We're very flat right now. We saw some stocks like Nvda and Google in the red, but Apple, Microsoft, and the others are more green, and the market's still like a solid, very flat. Now, there's also news coming out for tomorrow. Just know that 1 hour before the market opens, we have the PPI report coming out. PPI is very similar to CPI, except it gives us more insights on what's happening with inflation on the wholesale side. This is for the producer side, and we'll see what that ends up leading to. So please keep that in mind, guys. We're going to be looking for some interesting volatility amongst this release. I think that the data is going to cause some interesting moves. It's also worth mentioning that the data comes out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So before the market even opens, this data will be out. So make sure you're prepared for some volatility because of that. Now, one thing worth mentioning is the fact that CPI came out today. Everything was aligned with expectations, essentially. So we saw CPI month over month at 0.3%. On the core side, core year over year is at 3.3% aligned with expectations. All items CPI was at 0.2% aligned with expectations, and so was year over year. But just know that year over year for all items, we did see a slight increase. So that makes me suspect there could be a slight increase in PPI as well. That might cause some volatility, so watch for that as well. I think that PPI is going to be all very close to expectations. We are expecting a slight increase. We want PPI month over month to be 0.2%, core to be at 0.2 to 0.3% month over month, the same as before almost. We want core year over year to be at 2.8%, the same as before, to about 3%. And finally, we're expecting a bigger increase in year over year PPI. We might see a slight increase in this to about 2.2 to 2.3%. That is still very close to expectations, so don't worry too much about that, but there will be a slight increase. Despite that, later on at 3 p.m., we have the big guy Jerome Powell giving a speech. He may also cause some volatility, so be ready for that. In terms of earnings, we have Disney tomorrow alongside Alibaba. Alibaba could affect NIO. And then we have Cisco announcing earnings right now. They did relatively well. They basically beat on everything, EPS and revenue, and guidance was the same as before, but it wasn't really enough to get the share price to move, as investors were not that excited. As far as NIO goes, NIO has something very big that's coming up. NIO's 10th anniversary and NIO Day 2024 are approaching. Together, we're going to be looking for some interesting volatility for the month of December. We're just a couple of weeks away, so I can't wait to see what ends up happening. So get ready for their 10th anniversary very soon. I also think that this might cause some more volatility to give us more insights about their expansion plans, so get ready for that. In terms of their price predictions, there's been a lot of talk about how NIO is currently a strong buy according to many different analysts, especially the ones that have come out in the past. I'm looking for some very bullish targets for the next couple of months for the share price. Analysts out there are saying that they are seeing $26 a potential target by in a couple of years. And as soon as like next year, we could be looking for essentially the $6 to $7 range and then even higher levels. So if NIO falls to the 4s or even the 3s, that's a buying opportunity. You could easily see your money double within a couple of years, which is a very strong return on your investment, not financial advice when I say that. McGuire is going to likely outperform the market. McGuire is saying that NIO is going to outperform the market. The price-price ratio is dipping because NIO is a little bit weak for the time being, but things can improve as time goes on. Also, volume went up to about 124 million, so we'll have to see how things go. In my opinion, because we're holding 4.5, we could see a rebound attempt for 4.8 or so. But then we'll see if we get a rejection, start dipping even lower, so give that a little bit more time. I think that we're looking for essentially a test of about 4.5. If we hold that, we're looking for 4.8 again. And if not, we're going to be dipping lower. I think that NIO will ultimately come down to fill this gap, but there might be a small bounce coming because of the fact that we're trying to base for now. So look for an attempt for 4.8 or so. Excuse me. Then we could be dipping back down lower for the 4.6 range, maybe a little bit below that. And we'll see what kind of reaction we get. So look for a little bit of upside for 4.8. We could reject later on, continue to make lower highs. We tend to like pop and reject, pop and reject, pop and reject. Look for a pop and rejection is the most likely case, and we'll see what happens after that. For other factors out there, we have SPY. SPY is going to likely pop in the morning, so we kind of popped and dipped today before seeing a Korean close. Look for a pop to about 5.99 in the morning tomorrow, then a dip back down to 5.97. But as time goes on, if Jerome Powell pumps the markets, we could be looking for a nice recovery as we have a possible inverse head and shoulders forming. So look for a pop and drop in the morning. Then after Jerome Powell's speech at 3 p.m., he could pump the markets. There might be a bounce back up, so we'll have to see if that ends up being the case. Nvidia could be dipping back down to about 145 before it tries to bounce. That depends on different factors, as we have a bit of a disruption in supply chains for chips. So for 145 or so to be tested, maybe a bounce after that. Bitcoin's trying to push up higher. We're going to be looking for a dip lower. We're looking for 90,000, if not 89,500. Then we could be bouncing off those levels. A dip and a bounce is most likely coming, so keep that in mind. For ES, we're also trading flat. We could be dipping back down to 6,000 or below before it tries to bounce again. So watch to see what kind of reaction we get to that. We might pop to about 6,020 and dip back down to about 6,000 flat, or go a little bit before that, before we see Jerome Powell's speech. And it could be forming kind of like an inverse head and shoulders here. So this might dip and then kind of consolidate before we see a bounce, and Jerome Powell may launch the markets. For NQ, we have something similar, a double bottom here. We might dip a little bit lower to about the 21,100 area before we see a bounce back up to 21,200. So we'll have to see how it goes depending on our data. The QQQ may kind of pop and drop back down towards the 510 area. Then we'll see if we get a bounce. So we could be dipping back down towards the support that's all the way down there towards 510. Then we could be looking for a rebound after that. So that being said, I think that there might be a little rebound. So we'll see how things end up going. QQQ may dip a little bit more, but as we hit our 20 EMA, we do like to bounce. So we'll see what Jerome Powell causes. Look for a dip back down to 510, and we'll see how it goes. Aapl may be dipping back down to this imbalance, taking us down to about 224 to 223.8. I think we test up before we try to rebound again, so watch that very, very carefully. For a few more factors, we have the IWM looking kind of weak. If we don't reclaim 236, we're looking for a move back down to about 234. But I think that there's a good chance that that's going to essentially pan out. So look for a 234, and we'll see if we bounce after Jerome Powell's speech or not, but look for a little bit more downside. I think that coin is going to come down to fill the gap around 273. We might pop to 300, then reject and start dipping back down to that level. And we'll see if we get a bounce later on. Amazon's breaking out as long as we don't lose 214. We're favoring 216. Meta might be dipping back down to about 580, then 578, and we'll see if we bounce off that, but it does look a little bit more bearish. Microsoft is more bullish. As long as we don't lose 425, we're looking for 428 as our target. And then Google might be dipping back down to about 178, so we'll see how it ends up going. With that being said, guys, I really appreciate you guys so much for listening. The market is looking like it's very mixed, but there is potential to bounce after Jerome Powell's speech. That means that NIO might dip a little bit to about 4.5. Let's see if we hold that support. There could be a temporary bounce to about 4.8. But ultimately, I do think there's going to be more downside coming thanks to the head and shoulders, so I still hold that view. Might be a pop before another dip lower later on. Even if we get that dip, though, do not worry, because I think NIO will make a big recovery as time progresses for the long term. And this is another big buying opportunity for the short term. So just keep that in mind, guys. I thank you all so much for listening. That's my prediction, a small bounce off 4.5 to go back to up to 4.8. And then that's the most likely case until we see Jerome Powell's speech. We'll see how things go. I thank you for listening. Have a good night and peace out.